Hey, this is Tracy Lewis with Stuff and Things. I am going to be working on my Easter cards today. I want to share with you a little bit about colored pencils, and specifically these Stampin' Up colored pencils, which are watercolor pencils. Now, I have been working with my colored pencils pretty extensively lately, getting back into using my professional artist grade pencils, and since I have been working with that type of drawing, doing nature drawings, I thought I would take that same set of skills that I have developed for doing nature drawings and I would apply them to the Stampin' Up watercolor pencils. So because of my efforts to avoid messiness in our trailer, I haven't used my watercolor pencils much. I do have some artist grade ones, two different kinds. I have the Inktense as well as the Albrecht Dürer Faber-Castell watercolor pencils, and then I also have the Stampin' Up watercolor pencils, and even a brand called, I think it's called Fine Art, they're Hobby Lobby watercolor pencils. So I have 4 different sets, but I very rarely use them because I'm always trying to be not messy. So today I've got some tools to review with you. The goal will be to have the look of the coloring not look like watercolor. In fact, I would say that my goal is to have them look a little more like a very vibrant blends finish. So I'm going to be using to decorate the cards, and the cards are mostly finished. I'm going to be using this month's paper pumpkin on the grouping that I will share with you today. I have 4 of them. And here are the watercolor pencils, and what I had done, I've had these a couple of years now. I went ahead and did color matching with the wettest version of the pencils, as well as, so here's the ink on the far left. In the middle is the pencil. And then on the right are the Albrecht Dürer closest match. That's what these little numbers, the 3-digit numbers, are the Albrecht Dürer versions. And I see I haven't even finished all of them. Like, I haven't found a Cajun craze. And you'll see that some of the colors match really well. One example that does not match very well is Rich Razzleberry. Doesn't match well, but I have found a really good match with Albrecht Dürer 194. Melon Mambo is a pretty good match, a little bit more vibrant. I found a better, closer match to 192 of the Albrecht Dürer. And let's see what other notable. Flirty Flamingo was another one that the Flirty Flamingo watercolor pencil from Stampin' Up is a little bit more cotton candy pink. And the 124 is a better match. So that's what this sheet here on the back is all about. I could take a picture of it and I will post it as a download for people if you're interested. And there are 2 sets. That's why it says set 2 and set 1. The looks of these pencils are pretty similar. They're not looking like they were made by any of the high-end, whatever company Stampin' Up paid to make. They did color on the end. They did the name of the ink, put Stampin' Up, and there is a set of numbers on here. As you can see, like this one is number 19, Garden Green, so they did start a numbering scheme. Which I have not put on my wet applied swatches. I have not done dry swatches of these. I have just been using them. There is a white. They call it Whisper White because it was back before basic white existed. And let's see here. I wanted to show some, the ends don't always match. Like Crushed Curry is definitely not a brownish color. It is more of a darker yellow with maybe a little gray in it, so the color ends don't necessarily match the best. And then the funny one is that I enjoy is the Night of Navy is way too light, and the Balmy Blue is way too dark. And the Pacific Point is probably, if you swapped the Balmy Blue and put the Pacific Point, the Balmy Blue color really is the closest to Pacific Point. So the ends of the pencils you have to take with a grain of salt. I can even see that the end of this tip is much lighter even than the Pacific Point. So the big thing to have with using these dry for the type of coloring I will be showing you is to make sure your tips are sharp. Tips like these three on the end are not what I would consider sharp. Even these four aren't sharp. But you can see where, for instance, this basic gray, I have sharpened it all the way. The black is very sharp. Crushed curry is very sharp. So some of these have been sharpened to be used and others have not been sharpened. And perhaps when I did the wet swatches, I was actually applying the color and then applying water to it, so I wasn't worried about the sharpness of the tips. Tools that I use, I have just a regular manual sharpener that has two sizes. You can get these, this might have come from, it's a Staedtler brand, so it maybe came, so it's a nice brand, which means it probably came from Hobby Lobby or Michael's, a big box store of some variety. And I have some square colored pencils that are very limited in the sharpeners you can use, and this sharpener works well for them. The wet application that is commonly used, like when I go to classes and they have the colored pencils out, they will provide this tool, which is called a blender pen. This is very similar to the Blends blender pen. It is actually called a color lifter, but if you didn't own a blender pen, which you buy this, I think you get a set of 2 or 3, you could alternatively, for the same wet look result, buy an extra blend here, the color lifter, and you can use this on your pencils. I would definitely not mix them though. You need a special blender color lifter that is marked and is only used for your pencil leads, because it will add color to the tips that could affect your colors when you're coloring for the using the blends themselves. Erasers. One thing I do like about these, unlike blends or many other mediums like a watercolor medium, is that if you use these dry, erasers work. This is one really good eraser that I have. It is a pencil tip eraser. It's a little bit more chunky, so it does a better job of lifting the pencil lead off, and it will only work on dry. And then you have an eraser, a little brush on the end, which I like. I do have a bigger brush. You do get with the colored pencils, you get, as you burnish, which I will explain, you actually end up with little bits of color, and you can just brush them away. I have the Nouveau, kind of a thick makeup brush, and a makeup brush works just as well. For dry burnishing of your colors where you're blending them together, there's two dry mediums that I like, that is using white and using a special full blender. That all this is the non-colored non-pigmented material that is in, it's the wax and the oil and all the other bits and pieces, but no color. So you go ahead and you use every bit of it. You sharpen it with a pencil sharpener, and you can see where the tip, so when you burnish, a little bit of this material will come off of this blender, because that's all it is a stick of blending media. Or you can use white, and white is another really good blending medium that is not wet. And then there are certain brands of white that are really popular. Prismacolor white. I do have Prismacolor pencils, and the Luminance white, Derwent drawing white called Chinese white is super popular. But for today's purposes, I'm going to use these two to demonstrate what is called burnishing. And I am not going to use any wet, because if you wet these, they do activate and become watercolor looking, and I'm going to try to avoid that. So then the next fun tool, this is a, I've always had at home before we traveled, a Lazy Susan that I could put markers or whatever I was doing for a current project, and I could rotate it because it's a Lazy Susan, and it was made of wood. So I found this from the dollar store. So if you have a Dollar Tree, you can buy this for, now they're $1.25. Everything has gone up. You have a top and a bottom, and then you have these three pieces, these legs. And then I wanted this. This was not a rotating Lazy Susan. So what I did is I went onto Amazon and found 6-inch Lazy Susan circles. I think I got 2 of them. They were discounted. I think it was like 2 of them for $9.50 or something like that. And then I attached it here. You can see is a big piece of double back tape that's 2.5 inches wide. So I've just stuck the Lazy Susan part onto my pencil holder. And this way I can collapse it down and put it in my storage when I am not using it. But when I want to be coloring, I can use it. I can see that I've not even tried the markers. The markers don't fit. So for me, I've only used it for the watercolor, or for pencils, and the erasers and the blending stick. And we are going to be coloring. I have the stamp set here. We're not going to use too many colors, but I will have a couple of accent colors pulled out. The basic gray, the black for the eyes. So it's pretty much just orange, which is pineapple, pumpkin pie, whisper white, daffodil delight, basic black, basic gray, and early espresso. And then the last eraser that I just can't speak highly enough is for fine-tuning work, and I use this to actually help add whiskers and things to animals. It's called a Mono Zero elastomer eraser by Tombow, and when you buy it, it's a very thin eraser, but you get extra little tips to use. And this is a 2.3. So now that I've got everything out, I've already taken some basic white. So now I want to talk about paper. Paper is a really tricky thing with pencils, just like paper is really tricky with blends. And I have found that basic white is a very smooth, an ultra smooth. So that means you can't load a lot of color with your colored pencils. You are limited. But with the amount of coloring that you do for these smaller images, so far I have found it to be plenty of pigment to then blend with my blending tools. So both of these guys are going to be the same color, and this pencil has been used. It is a little bit dull, so I am going to sharpen it really quick. What you can't see here is I have a crank sharpener that goes a little faster for me. And it also does work. It's called a DAL 133, DAHL 133, and it works really well. It actually sits attached to my desk permanently. And then here's the nice tip you get. And it does work for both my hex round and square colored pencils. So it works on all of them. And because of, I think I'm gonna turn on light because I want you to see, and I'm getting the light reflected in, but my hand is actually casting a shadow. So I don't want you guys to see the shadow. The lovely thing about this stamp set, which I was going to find the box for you, is it has pencil sketching already on it, and I'm going to use that so that my source of light for all of the critters comes from the side, and then any of the shaded areas are going to end up being darker, and I will do a little bit of darkening with the basic gray. And I just take the pencil very lightly. You need to use light at first. The heavy use of the pencil is what actually does the burnishing, and right now I'm just applying color to the surface of the paper. There aren't a lot of grooves. Most of what I color on has a little more tooth to it. I like the Bristol vellum, and then there's also Bristol vellum smooth, which has a lot less tooth. It's more like the basic white. So I'm just making sure to add color to all of the shaded areas. I'm holding the pencil very loosely in my hand. I am applying the pigment at an angle. So once I finish adding this first layer, I'm going to go back in and do a second layer that then goes into the non-shaded areas. The duckling here is going to have orange feet and an orange beak, and so is the little chick. Some people go in the direction of these little lines. Other people will go in little circles, just whatever you want to do to load up the ink. Now you can already see the color changing as I'm revisiting another nice light layer. And the color is already brightening up. So many people who bought these when they first came out used them only as watercolor pencils with water activation. So this will be a unique use of these as strictly a colored pencil and not for the water aspects of them. So now I'm going to go ahead and I am adding this lighter, and I do want the color in the white to be lighter because it is where the light source is. And I'm making sure I don't want to add any pencil streaks or indent the paper. That is why I'm going so light. Sort of going in circles. It takes a while to get used to using the pencil really lightly if you're used to using it, because if you go heavy, it will look like a Crayola marker, especially if you use it on a really rough surface type of a paper. So now I'm just adding that second layer of color, which is getting that vibrant look to it. And it's okay to rotate your paper. I rotate the paper a lot when I want to be going in the direction of, say, these lines. I find that rather than, there's certain directions my hand isn't good at going. If you don't already know, I have really bad hands, and I have tortured them for so many years being a crafter, making jewelry, coloring, paper crafting, everything you can imagine. And I have had surgeries on them, and they're doing much, much better, but they still have their limits. And so I try to do whatever I can to make all of this the easiest on my hands as possible. So I could add, I think I can go a third layer, and that's about the final amount of color that I'm going to be able to put down on this very slick paper. I'm not sure if these are oil-based or wax-based pencils. Every pencil has a mixture of oil and wax, and it's just a matter of what the ratio is. of each in the ingredients. And then of course there is the water activation aspect of these. So he's looking really cute. And I can go in now and burnish or push around the pigment to its final look that I'm going after, which is a nice vibrant look with a darker yellow in the shaded areas. I might even go in before. I'm going to add a little bit of gray. I did ink the stamp with early espresso, so I am considering sharpening up this early espresso and not using the gray. I'm going to go for a little bit brown. So I have sharpened my pencil and I'm going very soft because I don't need the brown to be a dominant color, and I don't want to change the color of the yellow. I just want to darken it up a little bit in the shaded areas. These are meant to be blended together. Very much like the blends pens, the alcohol markers blend. These also blend. All right. I'm seeing a little bit more brown, so now I'm going to finish off. This is the, oh, this is the black. I want the gray. And this tip is not very sharp. I'm going to sharpen it. All right. I want to tone down the bit of brown that I am seeing. And now I want to take, and I am ready to do what is called burnishing. And I'm going to push the color all the way into whatever little cracks there are in this paper, which there's not a lot, and get the color to mix together and become a nice vibrant finish. So I'm adding way more pressure now with this white. And since it is white, I can actually go ahead and apply the white even over the white areas that don't have any pigment. It just smooths out the little pencil marks. Any pencil marks that are left will smooth out and disappear. I'm still not going heavy like I sometimes do on like a vellum. Okay, now you're seeing these little bits of the remnant of my pushing, and so you just take and you flick it off. You don't want to use your hand, because if any of that is pigmented, it will possibly streak your work, so you don't want to do that. Next, I'm just going to go in and do the orange beak. I'm going to put a little bit of black on the eyes. He's squinting happily. So like I said, the end look is a very vibrant, you just doesn't even look like it was done with colored pencils. It pretty much looks like it was colored with a marker. So there it is. Let me get some orange really quick. Luckily the beak already has, and this is a very bright orange, so you have to go very light. And slowly build up your ink so you don't get any dark streaks in it. You want it to blend in nicely. Very quickly I've added 2 coats of the pigment, and now I'm going to take my white and blend it all out. And that is with doing the blending or burnishing with the white. Now I'm going to do a very quick run through the chick. I still have the eyes to do on both of them, but I'll do that at the end. I've already got now 1 coat, and now I'm going to go back with a 2nd coat over the top, and then also work my way into the white areas. I'm trying hard not to add any lines. I don't want any streaky lines or scratchy looking lines, so I'm kind of making sure I go in circles here. Alright, I've got my color, and this time I'm going to go with some gray. A lot of nature colorists don't use blacks and grays. They like to use, you know, like a dark indigo or a dark violet or a dark green. That the theory that in nature there really isn't any gray or black. But for small pictures like this, I think it's totally fine to use the gray or the black to enhance these shadowed areas. So this will look a little bit different because I added the brown on the duckling, and this guy's not going to have the brown, he's just going to have some gray. Okay, so this time I'm going to use the blender pen. This is a Caran d'Ache. Here's a full one. Caran d'Ache is the brand, and they make a very high-end. This is one of the artist full blenders. Full Blender Bright, Swiss, made by Caran d'Ache. I think I bought them in a 3-pack, and I probably got them from an art supply store, a mail order one, like maybe Dick Blick Supplies. And I'm going in circles. You can go right across the white. This is going to stretch the color even more than the white did, and it will also make it even more bright. So I would be careful when you go over the white if you were using an actual colored pencil blender from one of the blender manufacturers like Caran d'Ache. So there is how they both look. They look very similar to me. They are done. I went kind of slow. If I'm by myself and I'm doing these, the coloring happens quite quickly. I just wanted to have you see the motions of my hand and how light of pressure I use. You can burnish more than once. You can add more colors. You could erase if you wanted and decide to change the hue if you needed to. There's actually quite a bit of flexibility. See, now there I accidentally flicked with my pinky, but I should have used this. I'm trying to teach good habits. All right, so I'm going to take the black, which is my last color, and I just want to brighten up their eyes. Again, I inked my stamps with Early Espresso. And if you're really good, I'm not a very good eye person, but if you were really good at eyes, you could get in here and like change the expressions on these little guys' faces. But I am just going to leave them as is. And there is a fine set of very vibrantly colored, using the Stampin' Up colored pencils. Dry treatment only, no wet. I think they have a nice feel to them. They are not as buttery soft as, say, a Prisma, but I think they feel actually very much like what's called a polychromos that is used. It's a harder oil type, like the ratio of oil to wax is more oily, where a Prismacolor is more waxy, and these feel more like an oil-based pencil. And I really like how I can get in and do fine details with them with the sharp tips, and the tips don't break. They're very sturdy. Prismacolor tips and other wax-based colored pencils will break with too much pressure, so you have to be careful when you start with a very sharp tip. I am used to doing the polychromos the most, so I sharpened these like they were polychromos, and they acted just like a polychromos. So now with that, I am all done coloring. I've shared with you how my Lazy Susan for my colored pencils. And when I'm doing bigger projects than these little tiny ones, and I have like 30 pencils out, having the ability to segment the colors, you know, here's all the colors I used today. So yeah, they could have sat on the table. But if I'm using 30 or 40 colors, I really want a tool like this that can separate them all out, keep the tips safe, and just really be within easy reach. Hey, last night I was going through the footage after I colored the duckling and the chick. I was walking through the cards, and at some point I wanted to zoom out so you could see the cards as I went through them, and that made the camera go fuzzy. So the rest of that footage is all fuzzy, and I decided I would redo it this morning. So I now have the 4 cards that I used the Paper Pumpkin kit for March, called Beyond the Horizon. I have finished them, but I still need to stamp the insides and the envelopes, so I will do that while walking you through what they look like and what materials I used. I do also have another set that I have finished. I need, I think, about between 12 and 18 of them, and I have 8 finished. So I will share the next chunk tomorrow and then the final batch later this week. So this one is using the Pale Papaya intricate circle, which I think of as a sun. So this turned into a scene. I've got some grasses, little hills. This white dry embossed is roughed up, as well as the outside edges are roughed up. I thought for a half a second that I might rough up the sun, but it's so delicate I didn't think that it could really handle it. So that meant I could leave Happy Easter, my friend, smooth edges to coordinate with the sun. And this is the new 1/8 inch combo pack trim. This is the Pale Papaya, and there's a Misty Moonlight. So I could have done either color, but I chose to stick with the color on color. So the envelope that I have chosen is one of the wonderful paper pumpkin envelopes. So I will be stamping on the envelope as well as the inside of the card. And the color that I think I'm going to go ahead and stick with, even though my chick here is, I think it's soft suede, I am going to use Misty Moonlight because I'm just going to do some random quick stamping. I will start with the card. That is the first one done. I will have a showcase at the end. The second one that I did, I worked on the bunny, and the bunny, because I chose this washed watercolor background, I wanted to have the color tones in him coordinate pretty closely, but very softly. So I used a multitude of colors. You can see a little bit of a light. We've got blue, yellow, the crushed curry, pink, gray, and maybe even a little bit of a darker brown. I could have done a little bit of early espresso. Did it all pretty soft, and then did a lot of white. There's even some shadowing in the white, adding a little more depth to him. I pinked up his nose and around the eyes, and I see I did not do any black on the eye because I wanted this to be very soft to coordinate with the softness of the image, which is one of the beautiful card bases that came with the kit. And then there's a little bit of olive green as well as a Cajun case strip. These are two extra decorative strips that came. I used the matte decorative dots. Those are retiring. I should also mention over here that these blue gems are also retiring. I actually went through and pulled all of my retiring embellishments and trims and put them aside to give them a little bit of love here in the last weeks of their being current. The new catalog has been given to the demonstrators for us to review, and then there's also a second chance, or a retiring shopping list with a lot of steep discounts, up to 50%, quite a few 50% off products. So this guy needs to be decorated inside, and the envelope I chose for the bunny is this one. Here is this one finished. It always makes me feel good when I finish things completely. So this is an interesting one because it actually ended up being a simple stamping panel that I did with the floral stamp set, which was the bonus stamp set that you got with this kit this month. And I also did a demo of how easy it was to just manually use the gilded leafing. So that's the fence, which ironically I didn't even remember to use it when I came up with my mix and match showcases. So I made sure that I used it today so you could see it in use. And we have a mountain scene. I added the birds flying over. I added some water treatment with this swish, which is from the Horizon Dyes, same as this green grass. The little old olive strip. This is a retiring crochet lace, and then again I used the blue gems, and then the Eden gems I believe are also sold out at this point. They were from an early release in November, I think, either November or December, and I just liked the unique shape of those, so I tossed those on for fun. And this Pale Papaya is the panel from one of the envelopes. In fact, it is from this envelope when I cut up one of each of the 3 envelopes. All right, and the envelope I have chosen is the coordinating blue with the white dots, and I added a whole bunch of dots all over on this card. These little dots on the mountains I added. There are dots on the flowers, dots on the leaves, as well as on the green, just to add more texture and depth since it is a texture-y card. I'm going to go back to the blue. And that is that one finished up. I have one more to go. And then I'll get this processed and loaded up. All right, so then this one, I actually colored the duckling with the orange, the yellow, and a little bit of the early espresso, like I did with you guys, but I, with the orange, used the full blender stick. This full blender stick, like I said, it's like, it really activates the brighter coloring in the orange, so you'll see that the beak is way brighter than the one that I colored. And so that is one of the benefits of using the blender stick that is made with the medium that's in the pigmented pencils, is you get a little brighter coloring. And I went ahead and did the outside of the envelope, the green envelope. I die cut the grasses, and then this blue Misty Moonlight is also a strip that came with the kit. This Time to Celebrate is a sentiment from the kit. Happy Easter, I went ahead and cut it all the way out, not square. Kept this one pretty simple, and I used a piece of lace. It also has both the matte dots and the blue gem dots that are going to be available through the end of this month because they are retiring. So the envelope I picked for this is the one that coordinates perfectly with it. Okay, so this guy will be done in blue. And that will conclude today's very long episode. I am curious which you prefer. Would you like longer episodes that go more in depth, or do you like the walkthroughs of the cards as a under 10-minute video? I am just so curious. I try to mix it up and vary things, but let me know what your thoughts are. We've got 4 cards. I will have them in the showcase at the end. That's this one. I would love to know any secrets, tips, or tricks you have for using the colored pencils, the Stampin' Up! Ones specifically, if you have found any other treatments that work well with. And what are your favorite colored pencils, if not the Stampin' Up! Colored pencils? I will be back with the next set of cards tomorrow. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and thanks for watching.